Hello, fellow book lovers, both readers and writers. I am Maddie Dalrymple. I write the Engineer suspense novels and suspense shorts and the Lizzie Ballard thrillers, and I also write, speak, podcast, and consult on the writing craft and the publishing voyage as the indie author. And this is my video series, What I Learned, where I ask authors 2 questions related to their latest book. What did they learn from that book that they would like to share with their fellow writers? And what did they learn from that book that they would like to share with their fellow readers? And I am here today with John Gaspard. Hey, John, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Good to see you again, Maddie.
It is great seeing you as well. And just to give our viewers a little bit of background on you, John Gaspard is the author of the Eli Marks mystery series and the Como Like Players mystery series. He also has 4 other standalone novels, including 2 Greyhound-inspired pastiches, The Greyhound of the Baskervilles and A Christmas Carol. John has directed 6 low-budget features and has written multiple books on the subject of low-budget filmmaking. In addition, he wrote 2 craft books for novelists, The Popcorn Principles and More Popcorn Principles, the sequel. And John has been a guest several times on the Indie Author podcast, including discussions about the top 6 lessons novelists can learn from the movies, speech to text and back again, talking about dictation, and lessons from filmmaking. And so today we are here to talk about John's most recent book. It's his 9th book in the Eli Marks series, The Professor's Nightmare. So, John, I'm just going to start out queuing up the first of the 2 questions, which is, what did you learn from The Professor's Nightmare that you would like to share with your fellow writers?
Yeah, well, it's a mystery like the other 8 books in the series. And I've talked about this before. I'm a big fan of Anthony Horowitz and the different mysteries that he's written both on TV and as novels. And his Magpie Murder series, the 2 books in that series so far, just blew me away because, particularly in the second book, there is an entire mystery novel in the center of that book. Read the first half of the mystery, then you have to read the writers that they're following, his whole mystery, which is a standalone mystery. And then the second half of the book after that is the solving of the primary mystery, which is solved by using clues from within that book. Confused? Yeah, so was I. I'm no Anthony Horowitz, but as I was writing The Professor's Nightmare, which follows my protagonist, Eli Marks, and his Uncle Harry and his new bride, Franny, have decided to move into a seniors environment, a co-op living place where they have their own big apartment, but there's a shared space. And as part of that process, they meet their new neighbor, Professor Charles Pemberton, who is a retired 75-year-old philosophy professor. And Charles begins having these terrifying nightmares where death is coming and stalking him. And Eli and Harry move in and try to solve that situation. In the course of writing that book, as Dr. Pemberton is talking to Harry about his life at this retirement community, he talks about how he's in his 70s now and he is simply not prepared for getting old. He said, I should have been planning for this. I'm financially fine, but it's just every day is a new thing when you're getting old, which is something I had said on more than one occasion to my doctor when I'll go in and say, it's my first time getting old. Is this a problem or is this just getting old? And then he can kind of delve into what is there an actual issue or is it just getting old? So Dr. Pemberton says in passing, someday I'm going to write a book called It's My First Time Getting Old. So excuse me if I go astray. And it's going to be just kind of a guide for people getting old and talk about it in a pop culture and philosophical sort of way. So I got to the end of that book. And like many writers, I've been playing around with AI. I've been listening to Joanna Penn for years. And when she and I talked about it, I said, well, for me, it seems to be the few times I've used it, it's like having a good junior writer where you can just give him an assignment and say, go give me 20 headlines for this. And then he'll come back, or go write this press release and he'll come back. The only difference is when I was a creative director and I had junior writers, they'd come back in an hour. And with Claude or Poe or ChatGPT, wherever you're using, they come back in 5 seconds. But it's really the same process. They give you a bunch of stuff and you comb through it and go, well, that's useful. That's not. Oh, I can fix that. Yeah. All right. And you're off and running. So I thought, wouldn't it be interesting using the Horowitz method if I actually wrote using AI, Dr. Pemberton's book? And if I gave it away at the end of The Professor's Nightmare. So someone reading it gets to the end of the book, turn the page and it says, remember that book Dr. Pemberton was writing? Well, he wrote it. And so using ChatGPT and hundreds of prompts, anyone who thinks that you can just put in a prompt and it writes a book I don't know what version they're using, but that doesn't really work. But I said, okay, you are a 75-year-old former philosophy professor and you want to write a book called It's My First Time Getting Old. and you're interested in all philosophy worldwide, but you're also kind of a pop culture nut, and you're also big on Alice in Wonderland. With that in mind, what would an outline for that book be? And it spat out 12 or 15 chapter headings. And I said, okay. And then from that point on, and it wasn't a long process, it was only about a week, but it was a week of steady work and lots of prompts. We went through each chapter and I'd say, tell me about this. And he'd spit something out and saying he as if it's a he, but it was Professor Pemberton. That was the primary prompt I would give him every day. Here's who you are and here's what you're doing. And so he was able to stay within that voice. And after about a week or so, I had pretty good book, pretty reasonable book about getting old and what that meant in a lot of different areas. I went through and said, now remember, you're a pop culture nut, so let's make every chapter have some reference to pop music over the last 50 years. So, things like Time After Time is one of the chapter, Knocking Heaven's Door is about death. I'm Still Standing is about illness. And then it took about another week or two of editing and futzing and making it actually work. And then all of a sudden, after 2 weeks of work, I had what feels like a reasonable book. It's not a book I ever would have written just because the amount of research involved, looking up all the different philosophy quotes. It was hard enough double checking them when I was doing the editing process, because sometimes AI makes things up and will say, so-and-so said this, and they look and go, no, that's Gary Shandling. That's not Mark Twain. What are you talking about? That's insane. So you do have to go through and check that. But now all the readers of The Professor's Nightmare can, if they want, download for free their own copy. That's my first time getting old, so excuse me if I go astray. One philosopher's journey into aging, death, and beyond.
So when you look at the final version, how much, if you had to attach percentages, do you think was the product of the AI, and how much do you think was the product of your own creative work?
The creative direction was all me. Go do this, go do that. No, that doesn't work. Do this. No, you said the opposite of this last time. Do this. So if I say, let's talk about the different views on life after death in different societies, it would spit out a bunch of stuff. And then I'd say, okay, well, that's interesting. Look at this paragraph again, and then delve into that a little deeper. Or look at this paragraph and find a comparison between that and a pop song, that sort of thing. So there was a lot of hand-holding along the way. But the actual words are pretty much AI, but the ideas behind where we're headed are all me. It's like I say, it's like having a junior writer, and every day he brings something in and you say, no, that's fine. Do this. No, you've gone astray there. Do that. And the next day he brings back the rewritten stuff. So how much was I doing? Well, I was sort of just leading, but he was off doing the writing.
Based on that experience, did you have any temptation to use AI to help plot out the next actual Eli Marks mystery?
Well, as an experiment early on, I did feed in 2 short stories and then said, based on what you now know about this character, what are some ideas? And they were terrible ideas. They were junior writer ideas, because it can't really think like that. It wasn't surprising in any way, and it was just sort of hokey. So I didn't do that. However, much to the consternation of my audiobook narrator, I did do a AI version of his voice. I did the cheap version, which doesn't cost anything, where you give him 30 seconds of the voice and it spits back his voice. And it was pretty close. And I thought if I paid for the whole thing, it would be a lot closer. The only difference is, and it's a very big difference, is it can't act. It can take some direction. You can say, emphasize this word or emphasize that word, but it can't act. It can't put the emotion into it that you need. So his job is safe, although it did make him a little nervous to hear what that sounded like, because it sounded pretty close.
Yeah, I think that it's only a matter of time before the AI audio will be able to provide an experience as well as just conveying information. And I do think that hopefully human audiobook narrators will have an opportunity to license their voice, because it would be cool to be able to press a button, have a new book in your past narrator's voice, and he gets a cut of that without having invested any additional time other than training the AI.
I did go ahead and make a AI audio narrated version of the Charles Pemberton book because it made sense. It's an AI book. Why not have
Yeah.
AI narrated? And since it's nonfiction, it doesn't require that same level of acting, and it's just fine. It's
Yeah.
just fine.
Yeah. So let's turn our attention now to what you learned from The Professor's Nightmare that you would like to share with your fellow readers.
Well, one of the things that there's a tension that I have with my readers, which is that they love the characters, and they particularly love the character of Uncle Harry, who is well into his 70s, perhaps his 80s. In the book, The Professor's Nightmare, he has a milestone birthday. We don't say what it is, but he does say many, many times, it's a milestone. It's a milestone. And over the course of the 9 books, Harry has grown older and Eli's grown older. And the message I received loud and clear early on from readers was, Harry better stick around. You better not do anything to Harry. So I don't know if I need to freeze them in time now or how much older I'm allowed to let him get. He's still very spry. The retirement community he's in is for people 55 and older. So he's not the youngest person there, but he's also not the oldest. And it's a question of how do I keep moving forward with this guy who is not the younger, spry Harry that we knew 9 books ago. So I beg the reader's indulgence as I try to figure out how to navigate that. One way I have navigated it, and here's some shameless self-promotion, is I started a middle grade series with Eli Marks at age 13 and Uncle Harry in his probably 50s. So we get to meet them when they meet, and we get to grow up with Eli at age 13 as he begins to learn magic. And that did allow me to make Harry younger again, and also to introduce Harry's first wife, Aunt Alice, who is talked about in all grown-up books, but has died before they start. So that's kind of one way I'm cheating death, is just making Harry younger by making everybody younger.
Do you anticipate that that will be a series? And if it is, how will you coordinate the plot points of that
Mhm.
middle grade version with the plot points of the adult version?
Well, he won't get that old. I don't think this is going to be a 9-10 book series. It's, as research, I read through all the Encyclopedia Brown books, and that series gets pretty tired pretty quickly. Part of the problem is that the only sorts of things Eli can solve, just like Encyclopedia Brown could solve, were petty thefts, someone lying, vandalism. There's no high crimes going on with a 13-year-old, which really limits the sorts of things he can deal with. So I don't think it's going to go on and on and on. And also, as Donald Sobel continued that series into 25 books, I mean, there's a lot of books, the mysteries that he set up were, I think, not just for a middle grade reader, but any reader, you would read it and go, okay, the solution is you mentioned the wrong phase of the moon. What? I don't know anything about phases of the moon. It just becomes harder and harder to have realistic things that your young reader can actually solve, as opposed to mysteries that we grown-ups read. If you got right down to it, most of them you can't actually solve. Most Agatha Christie, you can't actually solve. You might guess, but there's always going to be some element you didn't know about that. Yes, she was a nurse on the battlefield, and that's where she learned about this poison and blah, 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 blah. You're just there for the characters and the interaction, just as you are with just about any television mystery. There's just no way to solve it, which is why shows like Columbo and Poker Face are so much fun, because you don't have to solve it. You just have to watch the detectives solve it and see how they do it, because you already know what the answer is. So I want to not exhaust the series. I want every book in the Young Eli Marks series to have mysteries that as a kid, when you're reading it, you go, I got it. I was right. I was right. And then those books also, every one of them will have 10 mysteries. And there's also in the back, you can learn 10 magic tricks. So the idea is you can start doing some of this stuff that you're reading about, and maybe we can launch a whole new generation of young male and female magicians out of it.
I'm actually on a series kick in terms of things I'm thinking of in the writing world, because episode 210 of the Indie Author podcast is about creating a compelling series And it makes me wonder if you would ever consider having a separate series, not an Eli Marks series, but an Uncle Harry series that would be an adult series, but it would have that character younger,
Yeah. I've thought about
middle-aged or whatever.
putting Harry in the 1960s, which was sort of
Yeah.
his heyday when he was on the Ed Sullivan Show and when he
Yeah.
was traveling and doing all sorts of things. And that certainly is something I'm considering. Just having of all the characters in the books, that would be the one that you'd want to venture off and see what he was doing when he was younger. Because we certainly talk about it in all 9 books. There are references throughout as the different acts that he worked with, the different places he went to. So there's no reason why I couldn't do a series. And plus, doing something in the 60s, sort of a Rat Packy thing, would be fun.
Oh, great. Well, John, as always, it's been lovely talking to you. And please let our viewers know where they can go to find out more about you and Eli and Harry and everything you do online.
Probably the simplest thing to do is just go to albertsbridgebooks.com. That's albertsbridgebooks.com. And you can get your own free copy of Dr. Charles Pemberton's book. It's my first time getting old, so excuse me if I go astray. Just click on that and you can download a free copy of that. Sort of silly, but it feels like an actual book that he would have written. So in that way, it's sort of fun.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.